All right, you're not going to believe this. We're going to talk about one single day in healthcare, Tuesday, January 28th, 2026. A day when it felt like the entire industry split right down the middle. It was like two massive tectonic plates just slammed into each other, but they were pushing in completely opposite directions. It was wild, and it tells you everything you need to know about the future of medicine.
So get this, on the exact same day, an industry giant, a company you've definitely heard of, loses $67 billion in value. Poof, gone. And at the same time, a tiny biotech pioneer working on some seriously futuristic stuff sees its value jump by 25%. How does that even happen? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to piece together. What do these two completely opposite events tell us about where all of this is headed?
So first, let's tackle the earthquake, the one that absolutely rocked the establishment. To get what happened, you've got to look at one of the biggest names in the game, United Health Group, and the business that made them, well, a titan.
At the very center of all this is something called Medicare Advantage. Look, for years, this has basically been a money-printing machine for insurance companies. The government pays them to manage healthcare for seniors, and it's been an incredibly steady, incredibly profitable business. The source material we're looking at literally calls it a golden era. Well, that golden era just hit a brick wall. And check this out, because this is where it gets crazy. The entire industry was banking on getting about a 5% pay raise from the government. Seemed reasonable. Instead, the government came back with a proposal for 0.09%. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's like you expecting a $5 an hour raise and your boss offers you 9 cents. It was an absolute shock to the system. The government was slamming on the brakes hard. For United Health, this news was like a 1-2 punch. First, they announced they were on track for their first yearly revenue drop in more than 30 years. But the real gut punch was this thing called the medical care ratio. Basically, it's how much of every dollar they take in from you in premiums that they have to spend on actual health care. That number jumped a lot. They were suddenly spending almost 89 cents of every single dollar on care. That little sliver they get to keep as profit, it got dangerously thin, dangerously fast.
And so what happens when you put all that together? This. A nearly 20% stock crash in one day. This wasn't just a bad day at the office. This was one of the worst single-day drops in the company's entire history. A full-blown meltdown.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just United Health having a bad quarter. The source material nails it when it says this was a systemic signal. It was a message to the entire industry that the game had fundamentally changed. The party was over.
And boy, did that panic spread fast. I mean, it was like a contagion. United Health's main competitor, Humana, their stock immediately fell off a cliff too, dropping more than 20%.
And then you have CVS Health, another huge player. They got dragged down 13%.
And the dominoes just kept on toppling. Elevance Health, down 13% too. Within just a few hours, the entire sector was bleeding value, all because of that one little policy announcement.
Okay, so take a deep breath, because while that whole financial firestorm was raging, a completely different kind of shockwave was happening on the other side of the healthcare universe, in the world of pure science. We're about to pivot from a story about a giant collapsing to a story about a futuristic technology taking one tiny but incredibly important step forward.
The technology we're talking about is CRISPR. You've probably heard the name. The easiest way to think about it is like a pair of tiny biological scissors that can go into your DNA, find a specific spot, and just snip, making a precise edit. And the promise? Well, the promise is almost unbelievable. One-time, permanent cures for diseases that are literally written into your genetic code. It is the definition of a game changer. But here's the thing about game changers. The road is never smooth. Back in October, the FDA did something really serious. They pulled the emergency brake on a company called Intellia, putting a clinical hold on their key trials because of a major safety concern with a patient. It was a huge setback. But then, on this very same chaotic Tuesday, the FDA gave them a green light. Well, kinda.
And this is where you have to read the fine print. The FDA said, okay, you can restart one of your trials, the one for polyneuropathy. And that's great news. But the hold stayed in place for their other trial, the bigger one, the one for a heart condition that represents a much larger market. So yes, it was progress for sure, but the really big safety question about the really big prize, that was still unanswered. The market though, the market didn't care about the nuance. It saw this as a massive win. Intellia's stock absolutely skyrocketed, jumping 25%.
After months of being in limbo, even this partial green light was seen as a huge sign that this incredible technology still had a path forward. It was a collective sigh of relief that you could literally measure in billions of dollars.
So now we have our two stories, a crash driven by policy and a comeback driven by science. This is where we bring it all together, because what you're really seeing is a battle between two massive, opposing forces for the future of healthcare itself. This table just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the establishment, United Health, getting slammed by a top-down policy decision made in Washington. On the other, you've got the innovator, Intellia, navigating that slow, painful, bottom-up path of science and regulation. One world is driven by politics and spreadsheets, the other is driven by lab results and patient safety. And that squeeze on United Health? It's not a one-time thing. It's part of a much bigger trend, like this Trump RX initiative the source material points to. The government is basically making it easier for drug companies to sell directly to patients, cutting out the middlemen, the insurance companies and their partners. The goal is pretty blunt: take apart their business model and their profits from the top down.
But here's the fascinating part. While that political war is raging, the pipeline, the engine of innovation, it just keeps on churning. On that exact same day, J&J got a huge approval for a cancer drug. A medical device company was in the middle of a massive multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Another company was making progress on a non-opioid painkiller. Science, it turns out, doesn't really stop for politics.
So what's the bottom line here? What does this tale of two very different tectonic shifts actually mean for us, for the kind of healthcare we're all going to get in the future?
Look, the most important thing to take away from all this is that this wasn't just some random, chaotic day for investors. It was a perfect snapshot of the two great forces that are in a tug-of-war over the future of health. On one side, you've got the immense power of government policy trying to wrestle costs down. And on the other, you had the slow, complicated, but potentially world-changing power of scientific discovery.
And really, that leaves us with one massive question for the future. Which of these two forces is going to have a bigger impact on the care you get? Is it going to be the top-down policy decisions from Washington that change the economics of everything? Or will it be the bottom-up breakthroughs from the lab, the one-time cures, the incredible new technologies? That one wild Tuesday in January showed us that both are incredibly powerful. And the battle between them? It is just getting started.